Before the video starts, I am by no means a financial expert. To be honest, I don't even really follow the news. This video is solely based on my own experience, so take the advice with a grain of salt. Return on investment is not guaranteed, so be careful. Okay, enjoy the video. Bye-bye. I started investing in October of 2024. My friends had told me to start ages ago already, but as the wise man I am, I completely ignored them. But I still started in the end, so that's the most important thing, right? One of the first steps to start investing is choosing a platform to invest on. Taking the US as an example, this could, for example, be Robinhood, Fidelity, or Interactive Brokers, according to ChatGPT. However, since I'm based in the Netherlands, I went with the Giro. When choosing a broker, I looked at a few things: ease of use, the learning curve, and the cost. And lastly, my friends. And while this is arguably not one of the most trustworthy sources I could take, I do think it's a big plus to be able to actually ask some people for advice about investing, especially when just starting out. Maybe easier said than done, but after choosing a platform, it's time to actually start investing. And this is also where the fun part begins, which is choosing your strategy. Generally speaking, there are two types of strategies you could go for: short-term and long-term. Short-term could be anywhere from a few months to weeks to even day-to-day. An example of this could be the Wall Street clip you might have seen of Robert Downey Jr. just being completely lost by everything that's happening. Since I did not experiment with this strategy myself, all I can really do is speculate. But I think to be successful using this short-term strategy, you either need a lot of luck or a lot of knowledge, or maybe even a bit of both. And when just starting out, you probably only have one of them. On the opposite side, there is the long-term strategy, and also the one recommended to most beginners, and the one I used to. Here you're looking at a period of at least 5 years. A few advantages here are: it's less time intensive, and you also save on transaction costs compared to a short-term strategy, since you are buying and selling less. And lastly, and arguably most important, is compound interest. As Albert Einstein said, compound interest is the eighth world wonder. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pays it. You could basically see this as a snowball rolling downhill, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. This basically means that your interest keeps stacking on top of each other, which is also why it's really important to start early and why it's really beneficial for a long-term strategy. With that short introduction out of the way, I will show you my actual portfolio. First, some terms before getting into the portfolio. So the portfolio is basically your collection of money-making assets. And the two most common ones are stocks and ETFs. Stocks. By buying one, you basically own a small piece of that company. If the company does well, your stock increases, and if it does not, it decreases. An exchange-traded fund, or more widely known as ETF, is basically a collection of different kinds of stocks and bonds. Taking the S&P 500 as an example, you basically buy a collection of these different assets. And for the S&P 500 in specific, your investment will be split over the 500 leading companies listed on the US stock exchange. So about my portfolio itself, I decided to invest a small percentage of my salary each month, depending on how busy I think of a month I would have. This would be either bigger or smaller. One important rule I set for myself here is that all the money that goes into my trading account does not come out of it, for the time being at least. Since I'm going for a long-term strategy, I think it wouldn't make sense any other way at the moment. Here's a little overview of the money I've invested over the months. In the beginning, I mainly focused on ETFs with no stocks bought at all between November and January, while now I'm looking at investing more in stocks too. I've mainly invested in the S&P 500 since it's generally known to be a safe option for consistent growth. However, I must say that recently it has been doing pretty bad with all the uproar created around Trump. Still, I'm quite happy with the portfolio I've built till now. Still, I would love for my portfolio to be a bit better divided between profit and loss, but we'll work on that. What I've learned, especially in this last a bit unstable period, is the importance of diversifying your portfolio. And this can be done in many ways. You could invest in different countries and preferably even in different currencies. You could look at different industries like tech and food, and maybe even sub-industries like AI, but also investing in different assets like stocks and ETFs. And these are only one of the many ways you can diversify your portfolio, but as you might know, I'm also pretty much learning on the job, so I'm also figuring this out myself. And to take that one step further, educating yourself doesn't have to be that difficult. Nowadays there are so many books on every subject imaginable, so also on trading stocks and funds. I personally read Rich Dad Poor Dad, which is a great introduction to, I think, understanding money in general. And now I'm reading Grow and Think Rich by Napoleon Hill. However, probably not everyone likes reading, so you could look at other ways to educate yourself too. Many broker platforms have free lessons to educate yourself on the subject. I did this myself with the Giro, and if you can't find any, then I will put this one at least in the description. And even on social media there are lots of people who are experts on the subject, or at least say they're experts on the subject, so you could also look at them. But keep in mind that you gotta stay critical and also think for yourself, especially about the subject of money, and maybe even more importantly, your own money. That was all for my wisdom about investing, and I will try to keep you guys updated on how it's going with my portfolio. With that, I'm Casper Vries. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.